All right, it looks like people are joining us still, but we're going to get going. Thank you all for coming. We're so excited to have you for our first official event for the Association of Fundraising Professionals at the University of Iowa. So this is our nonprofit careers alumni panel, and it's hosted by the Association of Fundraising Professionals Collegiate Chapter at Iowa, AFPCC. So AFPCC is a student organization open to all undergraduate and graduate students at the University of Iowa. I'm Taylor Jackson. I'm an MFA graduate student in the Theater Arts Department. I'm also the secretary of AFPCC and the moderator for this evening. We are fortunate enough to have 5 Iowa alums with us to talk about their professional positions in the nonprofit sector. We're going to be hearing from Carter Bell. Carter is the Senior Associate for Program and Development at the Rockefeller Family Fund in Washington, D.C. Cindy Garcia is the Communications Associate at the ACLU of Iowa, located in Des Moines. Maddie Bro is the Web and Digital Specialist at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute in Washington, D.C. KayLynn Harris is the Communications Coordinator at Feeding America in Chicago. And Hannah Acker is the Assistant Director of Annual Leadership Gifts at Penn State University. So thank you all for being here tonight. We're excited to have you. After we hear from each of our panelists, we're going to try something a little bit different. We're going to split each of the speakers into their own breakout rooms, and then everyone who's in attendance will be able to choose the individual breakout room if you'd like to talk with that panelist about their career, have a small group discussion, ask questions, ask about their graduate education, whatever comes to mind. You can do that in the small group sessions. So let's get going. Questions. So we would like to begin just the discussion portion with our panelists by asking each of them to tell us about their educational background and about the organization that they currently work for. So Maddie, would you mind starting us off?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's very great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me back. The certificate program was wonderful in my Hawkeye experience. Like Taylor said, I'm Maddie Bro, and I am a graduate of the University of Iowa. I graduated in 2016 with a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism, as well as gender, women's sexuality studies, and of course, this certificate. During my time as an undergraduate, I was also a Division I swimmer for the women's swimming program, and was a finalist for the National Truman Scholarship, was very involved in sexual assault prevention efforts on campus too, being the first athletic representative on the President's Committee Against Sexual Misconduct. And yeah, it was a wonderful time in Iowa City. Since then, I've also gotten a Master of Arts degree in strategic communication, also from the journalism school at Iowa. That was in May of 2020, just last year. Went to a virtual commencement ceremony. That was interesting and fun. And I currently work for the Howard Hughes Medical Institute here in Washington, D.C. It's specifically in Maryland. I work on the communications team, and I manage content for our flagship website, hmi.org. So again, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great, thanks, Maddie. Next, we're going to go over to Carter.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carter. I also live in DC. I graduated from the University of Iowa in 2016 with a Bachelor of the Science in Political Science and what was then called the Fundraising, Philanthropy, Communication Certificate, and a minor in Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies. And I currently work for the Rockefeller Family Fund, which is based in New York, but my program area is in DC. And it's about 50 years old, and we do all domestic work. And it's family-led. All of our board members, except one, are family members of the Rockefeller family. And it was established by what we call the cousins generation. So the generation that former Vice President Nelson Rockefeller is a part of, for the younger generation to get involved in philanthropy. And so our board is a lot of younger people, so it's kind of unique in that way. There's people in their 20s and 30s and 40s and above, but it's really a way for the younger generations of the family to get involved and cultivate that philanthropy within them. And uniquely, it is not a technical foundation. It's a 501c3 public charity. So while we do have an endowment that we draw from, we also have more flexibility to raise money from outside sources to fund our different programs and projects. So we end up giving away more money than just our endowment and doing a lot of our own programs since we have that flexibility. And I work in our Economic Justice for Women program almost exclusively. Our other two program areas, which I can talk about if people are interested, are democracy and climate. And then I worked for the same company since I graduated almost 5 years ago. So I think that is kind of a unique role, and people tend to stay in philanthropy a really long time, I learned. And then I don't have any other formal education. I have gone to a writing coach, which was really helpful, and I can also talk about. And I'm currently taking some business classes through Indiana University since I work with budgets and our grantees, but I don't have formal training in that.
Great, thank you, Carter. Next is Cindy.
Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here. So a little bit about me. I graduated from the University of Iowa in 2018 with BAs in history and journalism and mass communication. I also did the fundraising and communication certificate. When I was at Iowa, I was an editor at the Daily Iowan. I was also an editor at Fools Magazine, and I worked as a communications intern at the International Writing Program. Right now, I'm a communications associate at the ASOU of Iowa in Des Moines, and I've been here since I graduated 3 years ago. The ASOU of Iowa is a private, nonpartisan organization that focuses on upholding people's civil rights and civil liberties in the streets, in the courts, and at the State House. So we focus on filing lawsuits against the state, mostly for violating people's rights. Some of the key issues we work on are immigrants' rights, freedom of speech, racial justice, LGBTQ rights, basically anything related to social justice. And yeah, I think I covered it.
Great, thank you, Cindy. Next is Hannah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for letting me join. So I'm Hannah. I graduated from the University of Iowa last May. Unfortunately, that's okay. But I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Studies and the certificate in Nonprofit Leadership and Philanthropy. And since graduating, I started my career as an assistant director of annual leadership gifts and a case resident at Penn State University. And Penn State is a land grant research-based institution. And right now we're in a $2.1 billion campaign. So I joined at a pretty great time because I get to work with lots of other gift officers to raise money for our 3 imperatives, which are I can't think now. Open doors, which we want like all students, no matter background, to come to Penn State. We want to create transformative experiences, which include our research. So we want to provide students and faculty with the funds to have transformative research at Penn State. And then finally, our last imperative is impacting the world. And so we are very focused right now on diversity at Penn State. And that's something that we're really pushing for in our last part of the campaign. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Hannah. And then next we have KayLynn.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. My name is KayLynn Harris, and I graduated from the University of Iowa in spring of 2019 with a BA in English, as well as a as well as a BA in political science and a certificate in fundraising and philanthropy communication. I currently am the communications coordinator at Feeding America, which is the nation's largest domestic hunger relief organization. We have a nationwide network of 200 member food banks that span across every county and parish. Our CEO is proudly from Louisiana, and the counties there they have. So always important to stress that part, as well as 60,000 food pantries and meal programs. Essentially, as a communications coordinator, I really get to span across all different departments, and it's a really great organization that I'm proud to support in the mission to fight hunger. Due to the pandemic, our organization has seen an exponential growth as well as need. So it's been really interesting to work during such unprecedented times and see our nation turning to food banks more and more for support.
Thank you, KayLynn. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was invited. If you have questions about anything, I'm going to be moderating the chat as well. So feel free to submit anything through there as we go through our next little discussion portion. So we found that students want to hear about different careers within nonprofits, and they're interested in knowing the responsibilities and day-to-day activities that graduates like you experience. So Cindy, we would love to hear about you and your role as the communications associate at ACLU of Iowa.
Yeah, of course. Happy to talk about it. So like I said before, I've been here since I graduated from Iowa. I started as a communications intern, and I was eventually hired as a full-time staff person. When I first joined the ACLU of Iowa, there was only one other staff person in charge of communication. So I've really kind of helped build up our program. When I first joined, for example, we didn't even have like an Instagram account. So I've really focused on expanding and making our social media accounts more consistent, because before, our communications director, she was in charge of media relations, social media, and internal communications. So she didn't really have time to really create as much content and moderate our channels like I am now. I mean, this is basically like a full-time job, you know, monitoring social media, the trends, what people are talking about to get more engagement. So that's a big portion of what I do here at the ACLU of Iowa. Before the pandemic hit too, I would often go to the Iowa State Capitol to live tweet or live stream hearings on key legislation that we were interested in, because it is important, you know, for us to be one of the key voices speaking out against legislation that's bad or supporting legislation that's good. Another part of my job was taking photographs. So whether it was at protests or photographs of our clients in lawsuits, basically just making it so if one of our lawsuits is covered by a journalist, just making it super easy for the writer to cover it and to have the assets they need for the story. So yeah, I love my job. Everybody says this, but every day is something different, especially when the legislative session is going on, because anything can happen, and it really drives my creativity. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Cindy. Carter, we know from your bio that you joined the Rockefeller Family Fund in 2016, but you've also had some interesting experiences within the political area. So we would love to hear about anything that you would like to share regarding like your position now, or your work in the political arena, and of course, you know, your position as the senior associate at Rockefeller Family Fund.
Of course. So in 2018, I started consulting for a group called Women Effect Action Fund, which is a 501c4, so donations to it are not tax deductible. And my boss at the Rockefeller Family Fund started this totally separate C4. And so since I staff her at the Family Fund during the day, it sort of made sense that I would move over there and staff her there too. And so it's completely separate. I'm paid through a separate invoice system, but I do spend probably at least 10 hours a month on this project. And it's really a vehicle to raise C4 money, which we can use for things like lobbying or more politics or more electoral work. So really showing voters which candidates support economic justice policies that we fight for at the Rockefeller Family Fund, so that they can make an informed decision when they're going into the voting booth and just engaging in other civic activity. And so through that role, I act more in a traditional fundraising role. So I staff my boss with call sheets each week. Sometimes I join her for donor calls, listening in or providing information. I follow up with donors who want contribution information. We used to have in-person events, and I would be responsible for the logistics of those and really being the first point of contact with different donors. Now we have webinars, and so I'm the one running the Zoom logistics and things like that, and helping to draft follow-up. Again, like my boss created it while I was working for her. So a lot of it was just learning as I went, Googling things, drawing on my knowledge from the certificate of things like moves management, and just really learning as I go. And then on the Rockefeller Family Fund side, like I mentioned, we're a public charity, so we do receive other sources of funding. And for that, I tend to draft the first round of almost all of our proposals and reports due to funders, so more traditional C3 grant writing. And then I also work with our grantees, so I read their reports, their proposals. A lot of the times I have to, help them edit it, since on the C3 side, things like politics tend to sneak in. So we have to make sure that's edited out, and I help them with their budgets. I convene our grantees too, since we're closer on the ground than I think a larger foundation would be. We get our grantees together at least once a month on the phone to talk about what they're working on, any questions they have, and connect them to resources. And then, like Cindy was saying, things just are different every day. So oftentimes I'm sending out action items or gathering an agenda or writing an agenda for a call, and things like that.
Great. Thank you, Carter. KayLynn, I noticed that the Forbes American Top Charity list for 2020 shows that Feeding America is the second largest charity in the United States. So what's involved with being the communication coordinator at this very large charity, Feeding America in Chicago?
Well, Taylor, the short answer is a lot. I feel like my experience with Feeding America has been very unique. So I graduated in May of 2019. And then 2 weeks later, I was walking into the door at Feeding America as their communications coordinator, while at the same time, the central team that I was joining had just lost 2 members. So I quickly assumed many hats in this one role. And it was a really great starting point to be at the organization. I'm kind of like the conduit of all information across departments as a communication coordinator. The foundation of my role is primarily support. So I support the communications team with whatever larger products they have, but I have 3 functions that I essentially own. One of those functions is internal and network communication. So Feeding America National Office, which is split between Chicago and DC. Well, now our offices are closed, so we're virtually now, has about 320 employees just in our internal organization. And there's still a lot of work there. So I manage our internal contact list. So whenever an employee leaves or joins the organization, I make sure that their contact information is updated. We have an internal website just with different types of assets. So on the communication side, I I manage the directory for that so people know the right person to go to. And then on our network side, we kind of have the same type of internal website system. It's called HungerNet. So that's shared between our 200 food banks as well as a couple of our PDOs, which are partner distribution organizations. They're just like a little smaller than food banks. Think of them as like major food pantries and stuff like that. They rely on HungerNet to get any key information regarding like Feeding America, because we just exchange information all the time. So I work to update the directory on that part. Also, I produce a biweekly newsletter that goes out to the network. It has a readership of around 5,000 individuals. That newsletter includes any key information coming from the national office that we really need to get out to our food banks. To our food bankers, whether that's the USDA has just made a SNAP rule and it impacts food banks and FYI, like in XYZ, we send those in network connection, or hey, we just announced a new partnership with Target and there are funds available. Contact our member grants team to learn about how your food bank can apply for this grant. Or on the marketing side, where we just developed this cool new PSA, here are the assets for that PSA. So all of that information gets condensed into this newsletter and gets produced every other week. And I really fortunate because that means I have a pulse point on what is happening in every single department, because all of these subject matter experts and all these different departments are coming to me and funneling me with information and then it's my job to reduce it to about 60 to 70 words to fit in this newsletter and then send it out to our network team. And it's other small things where it comes to like updating our website, whether that's HungerNet or FanelNet, as well as our internal website, america.org as well. There might be slight things where, okay, the USDA just released new hunger statistics. So I need to go and find every single spot where the old hunger stat is posted and update that. Or we just have new numbers about how many meals we distributed this past fiscal year. So I need to just go in and make sure that all of that messaging is accurate as well as consistent. So that's the internal and network side. The second aspect of my job is corporate partnership communication. So we have hundreds of corporate partners that span across different industries, and we just love to see the uniqueness that they each bring to the table. I myself have a portfolio of around 30 corporate partners, which I support directly. Some of them do cause marketing campaigns, which are more larger, elaborate activations, and some of them just give us grants, or they might be food partners where they just donate significant numbers of pounds of food product, or they might donate services. We have great partnerships with Amazon and other companies like FedEx and UPS that just provide trucks for us, because if a food bank in Texas has just had a disaster and they have a food supply shortage, and a food bank in Oklahoma is like, hey, we have an excess amount of X, but we don't have a long enough vehicle or the right transportation to transport these goods. They reach out to Feeding America, and then we reach out to one of our partners, and then they say, hey, we have a truck and we're willing to donate our services. So as a corporate partner comms rep, they often have campaigns that they want to promote and feature. I'm very fortunate where I'm supporting our Walmart account. Walmart is one of our biggest donors, and they're kind of our evergreen partner, so they're always doing something. But actually, yesterday launched their biggest cause marketing campaign, which is Fight Hunger, Spark Change. It's in its 8th year, and I've been fortunate enough to be one of the communications contact on that. So I work to draft our national news release. I work to review content for them. So I make sure that their social media post is in line with Feeding America's messaging. If they have any paid media, such as an ad, such as a TV advertisement or a radio spot, Feeding America reviews that to make sure it's in line with the most up-to-date statistics. And we work directly with our digital marketing team to figure out Walmart is making this tweet or making a Facebook post. Is that something that aligns with our social calendar? How can we engage and promote that material? And I do this with a variety of partners. One of my most favorite accounts, we're not supposed to have favorites like children, but I have favorites, is definitely Crocs, because they come with such cool, innovative ways where they created a cause marketing campaign where Crocs has these like special little charm gibbets that they created a special variety pack that directly benefits Feeding America. So I got to work with their marketing team as well as their design team to figure out, okay, what type of charms make sense that also represent hunger, but also is marketable to their target audience that like will actually sell to help us benefit, to help benefit and support food banks. So it's been really fun to work with so many different corporate partners and just to see like how their campaigns are coming about. Some of them work with amazing influencers to promote their campaigns. Last summer, I worked with Key. It's a sunglass brand, and they actually had Lizzo promote their campaign. So it was super like nervous and also exciting to know that like I'm on a call with like Lizzo's management team to go over like to making sure that she has all of the correct talking points. If she might make a Twitter post, she knows all the verbiage and all the language to use surrounding hunger to amplify our message. So that's the second aspect of my job. The third one is donor stewardship. So I work really closely with the development team to create our annual report as well as our quarterly impact reports. I directly oversee our donor honor roll, which is a section of our annual report where we highlight all of our donors starting at the $10,000 giving level all the way up to our visionary. Due to the pandemic, we have had an unprecedented amount of support that we're so grateful for. And on the opposite end of that, it has made my job so much more unique because in the past, we acknowledge our giving level starting at the supporting level, which comes around at 250,000. 3 years ago at Feeding America, 250,000 was a large amount. When we saw what happened during the pandemic, amazing donors stepped up and partnered with us, and now 250K are are rolling in like they're 10,000. So I have had the unique opportunity to work with the development team to create innovative ways of like how can we steward these donors, and also how can we make our annual report look a little bit more engaging where it's just not rows and rows of names and logos. So this year we worked really hard to implement more spotlight where we work directly with relationship managers to kind of get these like 250 word blurbs or stories from donors to talk about their impact. So it's spread throughout our annual report, so they have an opportunity to get recognition for the support that they gave, but also kind of talk more about why they chose Feeding America and just talk about why they support the issue of hunger. So that's been super unique. We have our quarterly impact report, which is just mini annual reports that report on our progress from the previous quarter. I've been fortunate enough to be a part of that redesign process. So we recognized that there was a gap where we were only creating one impact report to suit our foundation donors, our major gift individual donors, and our corporate partners, but you can't really bundle all those donors in, especially at such a larger organization, and think that report works for all three streams. So I work with a manager on my team as well as a development team to kind of figure out how can we create two uniquely separate reports that cater to one to our major gifts and our foundation donors and one strictly for our CP donors, because it just looks a little bit different in terms of stewardship. I've been fortunate enough to be a part of donor webinar calls. So recently we held a fireside chat with our CEO and a few CEOs from food banks to talk about our progress and our impact since the pandemic has started and what food banks are doing innovatively, and also to steward our donors and thank them to say, hey, this food bank was able to feed hundreds of thousands of individuals because of your gift directly. Like we were able to provide PPE, like hand sanitizer and face masks to our community, to our neighbors in need, because you stepped up and you donated X, Y, and Z. So it's been really cool to kind of be spread across so many different projects and just have so many, like my ear is to the ground in so many different areas. It's come to a point where if somebody doesn't know a place to start, they start with me as a communication coordinator, just because it's kind of my job to like have like my hand in everything just at any moment, because I need to be able to distribute information. I wake up and I don't know if I'm going to have like 4 press releases to review, or if I need to work with a food bank because they're having communication issues. They're not, their digital social posts aren't doing what they're supposed to do and getting the engagement that they wanted to get. So they come to me to figure out, hey, does Feed America have any assets? Can you point me to the right place? Or when we get a CP who's like, hey, we want to create a campaign, where do we start? And they usually start with me. So it's very cliche to say like every day is different, but it's really, really cool and really exciting to know that I get to have all these different experiences.
Great. Thank you so much, KayLynn. That was like a really great overview of really, I mean, nonprofits, you get to work with so many different partners, and like communications, you're so involved in every department, donors and, doing all that communication. That was awesome to hear about. Thank you. Maddie, you're next. We would love to hear about your position as the web and digital specialist at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And then we also know from your bio that you've held other positions that the students might be interested in hearing about at the National Institute of Health and Planned Parenthood. So what can you share about your professional positions since graduation for students who are planning to go into nonprofit?
Sure. So I can go in chronological order. When I still lived in Iowa, that's when I worked for Planned Parenthood. I was the Regional Director of Strategic Partnerships and Development in Eastern Iowa. I was based in Cedar Rapids, but went to Iowa City practically every other day. I was based in both health centers. And that was an incredibly interesting job. As Cindy mentioned earlier, the Iowa legislature, anything can happen. And oftentimes Planned Parenthood is sort of at the helm of that. We get a lot of attention politically. And with that, that oftentimes inspires donors to give more than they ever have. So I felt very lucky to be able to work with some very generous donors, both in major gifts and planned giving, as well as fundraising through events too, that oftentimes was inspired by legislation that was attacking our mission. Like I mentioned, worked in, I guess to rephrase it, I was sort of a generalist in a way. I was one of 2 non-scientific, non-healthcare staff members on the ground in Eastern Iowa. So if the University of Iowa wanted someone to come speak to represent Planned Parenthood, I'm your girl, I was there. Also working with donors who had planned gifts of $500,000 or donors who perhaps give $5 a month and everywhere in between. I was working with everyone, no matter their giving level. It was a lot of work. It was definitely very draining. Planned Parenthood's one of my favorite nonprofits, and sometimes you feel like you're living the mission when you work for a nonprofit like that. But it was definitely my dream job, and I feel very fortunate to have worked there. And when moving to DC, I was selected for the Communications Fellowship at the National Cancer Institute, which is within the National Institutes of Health. I was there for about 9 months, then was sort of poached or recruited to the Howard Hughes Medical Institute to join the Office of Communications. But in my time at the National Cancer Institute, I was exposed to the whole world of the federal government. It was very interesting. Having been part of NIH when the pandemic began, I did get exposure into what it's like to work for a health organization in the midst of a pandemic. And while the National Cancer Institute isn't focused specifically on virology or immunology, we definitely had to tailor a lot of our talking points to the pandemic specifically, which was very interesting. And currently I'm at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, which is oftentimes ranked in the top 5 endowments, largest endowments in the world. It's 22 or $23 billion currently, and it is Howard Hughes's fortune. He had a vision as a 19-year-old to help drive science and to figure out the source of life. And 60 years later, HHMI is what it is today. We do not accept private donations, nor do we solicit them. It's all based in Howard Hughes's fortune. And with that, we have a pool of about 300 what we call investigators or scientists around the country that we fund their particular research, including one of the Nobel Prize winners last year, Jennifer Doudna, who was part of the first all-female pair awarded the Nobel Prize in chemistry for their discovery of the CRISPR genetic alteration technology. So that was a really awesome communications announcement to be part of, and I spearheaded the digital efforts for that, both on hmi.org. I also lead copyright and use permissions for all photography for HMI as well. One of our main partners is the Associated Press, specifically their photography branch. So I work with them regularly too. And it's kind of funny, I joined HMI during the pandemic, so I haven't met a lot of my coworkers in person yet. And I'm sure that a lot of you are kind of experiencing that in one way or another, where it's work or school, but have still felt a great sense of welcoming in the organization. And HMI is definitely a very special place. So I'm very happy to be part of it.
Thank you so much, Maddie. Hannah, you're a case resident at Penn State University, where you serve as an assistant director of annual leadership gifts. Can you tell us what a case resident is and how you came across this opportunity and what kind of like your job entails at Penn State?
Yeah, sure. So first, I'll just tell you what CASE is. CASE is an organization out of DC, and it supports the advancement of it supports educational advancement. So it's a global organization. And I heard about the CASE residency program. It all started when I was a development intern at the University of Iowa Center for Advancement. I was seated next to the case resident at Iowa for that year. And it sounded really interesting to me because I learned that she came from a different university, and the case residency program was kind of made to put you somewhere new and give you more experience at a different university than where you graduated from. And it was also a really good opportunity to develop myself professionally. So through the case residency program, you have we go to like 3 to 5 conferences a year. This year it was virtual. I mean, it's been fine. But so we do that you get 3 to 5 conferences, which is a great networking opportunity. And then we meet 1 to 2 times a month with different people and organizations in higher educational advancement. So we're focused on higher education in my cohort this year because we all work for universities. But the process of getting to that point at Penn State was long. I initially applied to the case residency program October of my senior year of college. And from there, I went through a series of interviews. I went to DC for an in-person assessment, and then my application was placed at a random school, and it got placed at Penn State, which was my number one choice, actually. So that was lucky. But so from there, I interviewed 3 times with Penn State, and my final interview was at Penn State. So I flew out to State College, and I interviewed with my team, which is the annual leadership gifts team, and we're in the Office of Annual Giving at Penn State. And then I interviewed with the athletics team as well, and I was offered my position. And so as an annual leadership gift officer, I work with donors who give annually. These donors give between $25 and $2,500. So my goal with meetings with these donors is to increase their annual gifts. It's kind of interesting because I'm a generalist at Penn State. Major gift officers work with the college or work within one unit, and they only work with people who want to give to that specific college or unit. But as an annual leadership gift officer, I'm able to work with people from all over the university. If they want to give to the College of Business, I'll work with them. If they want to give to like the Arboretum, I can work with them. So I think that's a really special part of my job, just because I really didn't know much about Penn State. And now I feel like I know everything just because I'm working with so many different people. But so I feel like essentially as an annual leadership gift officer, our job is to screen for major gift donors, for future major gift donors. I meet with a bunch of people, and some people don't want to ever give again, and some people want to start doing annually funded scholarships, or they want to start increasing their gifts each year, and that's a really good indicator that eventually they could be major gift officers. So I think my job right now is a pipeline for major gift donors, which is pretty cool. But another interesting part about my position is that it is essentially like a 1-year position as a case resident. So I'll be done as a case resident in July, but I'll stay on as an annual leadership gift officer with Penn State. And so we only stay in our positions for 18 months usually. And so right now I'm like in the process of figuring out what my next steps are. And this is a plug for higher educational advancement. I really enjoy the fact that I don't know if I want to be like a major gift officer, or some days I want to do alumni relations or events. I think that's really, or stewardship. I think it's really cool that in higher education advancement, there are so many different areas that you can go to, and they all relate to each other. And so I am in the process of kind of figuring that out. And I recently accepted an offer to start a master's in higher education program at Penn State. And so I'm excited for that, because I know that I want to stay in educational advancement. And so I think that this opportunity will help me figure out, give me the tools to grow in the field, and also help me figure out exactly where I want to go from my annual leadership gifts position.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. And thank you to all of our panelists for everything you shared. It was so cool to hear about your positions, how you got there, your education. It's super, super interesting. I appreciate you all. So we're going to our next part. We're going to give everyone a chance to mingle in those smaller breakout rooms that I mentioned earlier. So you will be able to choose the room that you would like to go to, and each of our panelists will be in one of those rooms. So you can ask specific questions, if anything came up during their chats that you wanted to follow up on. At 6:28, we'll bring you all back together for some final announcements. But that should be it. So it looks like Sarah's getting ready to create breakout rooms, and you'll be able to choose from there. Okay, well, welcome back. I hope you had fun in your breakout groups. I'd like to take a moment to thank our panelists. They were all so awesome to hear from. We learned so much from your experiences, and it was great to hear about your backgrounds. So thank you for taking the time to come and chat with AFPCC. Let's see. So the Association of Fundraising Professionals Collegiate Chapter would also like to thank everyone who attended tonight. This AFPCC is sponsored by the Certificate in Nonprofit Leadership and Philanthropy, which some of the panelists spoke to this evening. So you'll receive an email tomorrow that will include a link to the recording of this event, and the websites of AFPCC and the Certificate in Nonprofit Leadership and Philanthropy. So if you're not already a member of AFPCC, we invite you to check out that website and then submit a membership form to access all of the great resources that are offered. We also have another panel coming up at the end of the month that will feature some other professionals that would be great to hear from as well. So this concludes our event for tonight, but if you're interested in talking to a panelist that you didn't get to chat with before, you're welcome to stay a little bit longer to network. But thank you all for coming, and have a good night.